Hi, thank you for clicking on the video, and I hope everyone is doing really well. So recently, my mom told me about some people in my family who have decided they are going to be practicing intermittent fasting. My response was, why? She didn't know why. They didn't really explain why. They explained how they were doing it, so then she explained to me how they explained it. That's not intermittent fasting. Part of it is, but they're doing some extreme version of intermittent fasting where they go 24 hours plus without eating, which can be part of intermittent fasting, but it's not the healthiest, and I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. I did feel a little hypocritical scrunching my nose up at the thought that these people were doing intermittent fasting because I myself have practiced intermittent fasting in the past. But I also think that might be why I turned my nose up at it, because one, they have a misunderstanding of what it is and why it's something that could be practiced. And two, I've experienced it and I know that it's not always the healthiest decision or choice. I would say within the past year, I've slowly gotten away from intermittent fasting, and I'll explain how. But first, we need to go way back in time. It was something that just kind of came naturally to me. It wasn't a decision like some people decide they're going to intermittent fast. It wasn't so much a decision. It was just sort of a natural thing that occurred. I didn't feel hungry until later on in the day, but the reason why was because I'd trained myself for so long to go without food that hunger was not something that I felt very often. Like, I trained my body not to feel hungry for a long time. In a way, intermittent fasting was just a natural response to my hunger cues, but also my hunger cues were out of whack. And here's why. So it was around 4th or 5th grade, and I guess that would put me at like 8, 9, 10 years old, which is around the time in my family that's when you start taking care of yourself. You feed yourself. So if you want breakfast, you got to get up in time to make yourself breakfast. And I preferred, even back then, sleep to eating. And so there were days where I would rather sleep in than wake up before school and make food, because I also had to get up and make my lunch. So I had to divvy up the time where I thought it was more important, and sleep was more important. That's when I started to skip breakfast every few days. When I reached middle school, so I guess 11, 12 years old, this is when I made the conscious decision every day to not eat breakfast. It started because I was bullied for being bigger, and I didn't like that. I'd been told I was fat my entire life, and now I had my friends telling me that I was too fat to be their friend. That I was fat, that I was gross, that I was all these things, and they would brag to me about how little they ate, and they would mock how much I ate, and looking back, it was not that much at all. I had friends tell me I should just stop eating, and other horrible things. Middle schoolers are vicious. They say some pretty horrible things to each other, and I'm not saying I'm innocent either. I wasn't always the nicest kid, but this is the experience I had. These were the insults directed at me. I knew my whole life, the less you eat, the less you weigh, so if I cut out a meal from the day, that equals less food, right? Which means weighing less. So I started skipping breakfast on purpose every day for years. Up until it was recently, like within the past 5 years, that I started eating breakfast again at breakfast time. But I created a habit at a very pivotal point in my life, a very important point in any kid's life when they're developing. It was a habit that was very hard to break. Basically, I trained my body not to be hungry. I trained my body to expect food later, and so that it knew not to send me hunger signals. It knew to be fueled off of what I had stored or what I had eaten prior. As I got older, and I entered my 20s when I started working out, taking my health seriously, taking recovery seriously. I thought it would be perfectly okay to continue intermittent fasting because you eat when you're hungry, you stop when you're full, you're listening to your body. It's just I had trained my body to signal me that I'm not hungry. In my brain, I'm like, I'm intermittent fasting because this is just what my body naturally does. Intermittent fasting is not natural. It's a trained behavior. It's something that you actually have to put time and effort into creating that internal muscle memory habit. Your appetite, in a way, is a muscle, and you have to train it. Like any muscle, it sometimes gets tired and worn out, and sometimes you don't have an appetite. So then I began saying I was intermittent fasting. The more I worked out and the more I ate in a more balanced way, and the more I respected my body, the more I started to notice that I was becoming hungrier earlier than I was used to. But because I was intermittent fasting, I couldn't allow myself to eat until I entered my eating window because I was following a protocol to a T, which is, in a way, an eating disorder. And that's not me saying intermittent fasting is an eating disorder. It's the keeping yourself from eating even when you're hungry. That's a symptom of an eating disorder. You have to realize that people who don't understand intermittent fasting, they do this, where they keep themselves from eating until they enter their window of eating instead of responding properly to their body's hunger cues, nourishing and feeding their body when it sends the signal, hey, I'm running low on energy, or I'm not feeling well, I need something in my stomach, I need that boost of fuel. People who ignore that, they're not doing intermittent fasting right. I'm just gonna come out and say it, you're not doing it right. First and foremost, you need to be respecting your body. And if you are using a practice to disrespect your body, you're not doing that practice correctly. So my eating window started at around noon. And I started to notice that around 11 and 10:30, I would start to get hungry every few days. This is how I trained my body to go back to being natural and normal and have normal hunger cues early in the morning. Now, I'm not saying that everyone on the planet should have hunger cues in the morning. Now that I kind of know my body a little bit better, I'm understanding the natural capabilities of it and how I had not been responding properly to my natural signals. I honored my hunger when I felt it. So to train your body to feel hungry at any given point, you have to be consistent. So there were days where I would have like a little pain of hunger at like 9:30, but I would honor that. And then maybe the next day I wouldn't feel super hungry at 9:30 on the dot, but I would, start making something to eat because I knew it was coming. And so then maybe around 10 or 10:15, it hit. So then the food is like ready to go. Your body is not on a clock, which is another thing why I think it's silly that people are like, I can't eat until 1 p.m. when my eating window starts. Like, your body doesn't know. Your body's hungry. Your body knows it's hungry. It doesn't know what time it is. So I started training my body to be hungry within a certain time period so that it actually corresponded better with my work schedule. I didn't have to arrive at work and all of a sudden I'm starving, but maybe I don't have the opportunity to eat because we get busy. I'm able to be hungry and honor that hunger prior to leaving for work. So it all kind of works out. There are days where I just don't feel like eating. I'm not hungry. I don't feel good. I don't want to eat. So I don't sometimes. I'm only human, okay? I'm not perfect. I do not eat breakfast sometimes. Another factor that might contribute to that hunger hitting at a different point in time in the morning is depending on how much or what I ate the night before, if I work out that morning, and where am I on my cycle. I think a lot of people hear the term intermittent fasting and they immediately are like, oh, I know what that is. Like it is self-explanatory, but there's more to it. And I don't think people take the time or the effort to look into it, to like really understand it. As I said before, it's totally normal if you don't feel hungry in the morning. I think a lot of people naturally intermittent fast because they don't feel hunger, but it's when you take that practice and you take it to an obsessive level, which is what I did. It was no longer a listening to my body's hunger cues. It was being strict about ignoring my body's hunger cues. I think it can be a super useful tool to regulate a body's functionality. It can be used to reverse some minor health issues. And if done properly, it can be a useful tool for weight loss. Necessary weight loss. You still have to eat enough calories for your body, whether you're intermittent fasting or not. You still need to make sure you're getting proper nutrients, whether you're intermittent fasting or not. I feel like people think intermittent fasting is a cure-all when it's just, you're literally just eating later. If you aren't changing your bad eating habits, you're just kind of creating a new one. I think a lot of people think intermittent fasting is perfect for weight loss because they have the same mindset that I did, and that was, if I'm skipping a meal, that means I'm eating less, which means I'll weigh less. But that is not necessarily true. Just because you are skipping a meal does not mean you're not going to make up those calories later, which is definitely what I did a lot of the time when I would skip breakfast on purpose for the sole reason that I wanted to be skinny. Because I would get home from school and binge out on fruit and eat so much to make up for the fact that I was starving from school. I think a lot of people also think if I make my eating window smaller, that's going to restrict how much I eat. No, that's just going to increase the speed at which you eat and the mentality that you need to make up for the fact that you haven't eaten yet. And a lot of people put off eating for as long as they can and then they binge out because they're so hungry. Their body doesn't know when it's full because it's distorted. The most common eating window is about 8 hours. And I think people think, I'm only eating for 8 hours. You're not eating continuously throughout those 8 hours. So if I'm only eating for this small period of time, I must be eating less. When you might not be. It can create the feeling like you have to get all the food in because you know you have to starve yourself for the next 16 hours. It creates the all or nothing mentality. It creates the last meal mentality. It creates the, I'm never going to get to eat this again mentality. Like I said, some people do naturally intermittent fast. Some people take it to extreme levels and do it improperly and become strict and obsessive. So that is my take on intermittent fasting. I think if your body naturally does not feel hungry early in the morning, then honor that and don't eat. Like, you shouldn't be force feeding yourself unless you have goals in mind that require you to do that. If you are in recovery from an ED, intermittent fasting is not the route you want to take. You want to make sure you are eating enough consistently throughout the day, consistently day to day. Intermittent fasting is not for people who have disordered eating habits or have the potential to develop and use intermittent fasting to become a disordered eating habit. This was my intermittent fasting story, where it started, how's it going, that sort of thing. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you did not enjoy it, you can give it a thumbs down. That is cool too. I don't mind. If you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing and be sure to hit the notification bell to stay notified of all future uploads. If you have any comments, questions, video suggestions, anything at all, feel free to leave that in the comment section below. Be sure to go follow me over on Instagram, and I will see you next time. Bye!